Hello, and welcome to the first episode of Assembly. Not only is this the first episode, but it is also going to be over several parts, covering my construction of a replacement for the Reclamation hub, the fortress which I have used to this point during my campaign. This video will try to cover as far as installing the main and secondary weapon systems in the new fortress, as it is a from the ground up construction, making a complete replacement for the original fortress in a new shape and design. The original fortress is just too downright weak and inefficient for my purposes, so I felt this was the best way to go about it. So, let us begin with designing the weapons. To be honest, weapons were the big letdown on the original fortress. The heavy laser cannon, which was supposed to be the main firepower, turned out to be all but useless. The secondary guns had severe ammo problems, and there was nothing else on it to speak of. So this time I just started off by designing 3 weapon systems shown on the screen right now, which is an anti-ship cannon, an anti-aircraft cannon, and a missile launcher, because I have plentiful reserves of metals, so I think I should make good use of that. To allow me to make these weapons, to start out I actually made a small fortress. This isn't part of the Reclamation hub itself, it's just a platform to hold the weapons up while I'm working on them and testing them, because otherwise they would just fall into the sea and it would, well, not really be very productive. So I'm just skipping over this part and getting straight up to the point where I'm working on the weapons themselves, and just showing you what I'm planning and what I think I want to do with them. The first thing I did towards making the new turret was trying to create a basic shape for it. I was considering either going with the original size, the same one found in the turret of the Reclamation Hub Mark 1, or going them a block wider, which would allow me to fit more parts into the cannon and just make them more powerful in general at the cost of making them slightly larger. I did try making a larger ring, which worked out well at first, until I completed an entire hoop fit and realised it didn't look so much as a circle, which was the other thing I wanted for it, but it was more like a cross or a star shape. That would not look very good in actual combat when it was in use, because if it turned, the parts would just be, well, completely out of alignment and maybe not as protected as they could be. They might even expose some of the cannon pieces in the top of the turret, and I didn't really want to do that. So in the end I decided to revert it, and for the anti-ship cannons at least, I went with the same cannon size as I used on the Reclamation Hub's original turrets. The reason this is a ground up change from the turrets on the previous fortress is because of a completely different design style which I'm going for. As you can see, this flat disc on top is going to be the facing piece of the cannon. It's also going to be the only exposed section to enemy fire, because the rest of the cannon will stretch down below and be housed within the actual armour plating of the fortress itself. This is different from the turrets on the Reclamation Hub Mark 1, because they were completely exposed, simply 3 thick turret sections. Everything contained in a single turret, nothing hidden within the fortress itself, which, while simple, actually restricted the size and how much could be fitted into them. These new turrets, despite having a gap between the top firing piece and the bulk of the cannon, actually contains 6 layers, so that makes it twice the overall mass compared to the previous cannons. These anti-ship cannons are really designed for surface targets. I haven't put elevation pieces in the turrets, as you'll see shortly, and there is a great deal of ammunition storage, which is something else I learned from the turrets on the previous version. They ran out of ammo so quickly, it was unbelievable. But these ones can actually fire at a high sustained rate. Now of course, for a big shell, it has armour piercing involved, and also high explosive shells as well, just to inflict additional damage on anything that it might hit. Really, well, I'm kind of struggling what else to say about it. It's a slower firing design compared to the previous one, because the spare space in the top of the turret is actually used for gauge increases, which puts the shells at twice the gauge of the previous cannons, which slows down the rate of fire by a considerable degree. But that also means it'll be good for ammo conservation, despite having the increased ammunition cost, because they'll fire more slowly, so the shells have more chance to reach the target and inflict damage. On the video right now I'm putting in the turret. No, I'm actually putting in the barrel. I was experimenting a bit with this, trying to work out how long I wanted it to be. The removal of the elevation piece really restricted the field of fire, but I still went for a balance between motor barrels and standard barrels because I still wanted to maintain the 45-degree angle capacity, which is inherent to the firing piece. The last thing I added to this turret was a shield, which you just saw going up and being configured. And that is a last-ditch defense in front of the firing piece itself. It won't protect against an explosive shell, but, well, it's just trying to defend it. Now the last thing on screen is the turret being fired, just to test how quickly it fires. It's considerably slower than the previous turret, but the shells should have much more impact when they connect with a target, and they do have a lot of firepower going for them. From here, I moved on to my next turret design, which would be the anti-aircraft turret. These were the two weapon systems I planned to install into the fortress, and, to begin with, I was planning to build them to be interchangeable. I was planning a dual cannon turret, which would fit into exactly the same space as the anti-ship cannon, but with a more rapid fire approach. But very, very quickly, I decided I wanted to make it a quad cannon design to increase the volume of fire going towards an incoming aircraft. And soon after that I realised it would not quite fit in the actual turret style used by the anti-ship cannon. This led me to develop the anti-aircraft gun as a larger, independent design with a turret cap on it, so it could be built on the outer surface of the fortress rather than actually being embedded into an armoured tower. I wanted the gun to be long range and accurate, but it took several tries to try and work out exactly how long I wanted the barrel to be. Since this is a fortress, I was using standard barrels on the front, just like the previous cannon, as well as motor barrels to reduce the effects of such a length, and elevation barrels to give it the necessary elevation to fight targets at a variety of ranges. I planned these turrets to actually be side mounted, which would actually allow them to engage a target directly above the fortress, so something that could hover above or at a high altitude, kind of like the vessel that attacked the previous fortress and almost levelled it, would not pose much of a problem. Again, these cannons would have large reserves, and I managed to build it faster than the previous one because, despite being a quad turret design, once the initial layout was worked out, there is actually less space per cannon to fit into it with ammunition and various supplies. My goal here was a high rate of fire, low ammunition cost, which meant minimum caliber, and maximum possible rate of fire to compensate for any movement of the aircraft that it was shooting at. They still have a fairly high armour piercing value and explosive warheads, and overall the intended effect is to shred through wings and supporting air balloons to ground an incoming hostile aircraft and allow the anti-ship cannons to deliver any heavier firepower if needed. But really, this turret is also a tougher turret as well because the gaps inside it give space for additional armour plating, and, well, it just took a while to fill out all four sides. I just wanted them to be the same, so I worked to get each cannon to be equal. And lastly, I included two predictors to give it a firing bracket instead of a single target point. Now on screen is the cannon actually being test fired, just to make sure that it works properly, and this footage has not been accelerated in any way. That is the actual rate of fire, each individual cannon having a rate of fire of 0.1 seconds, which is why it's designed to shred incoming aircraft. It can just tear them straight out of the sky with this kind of speed. This makes it a polar opposite of the anti-ship cannon, which is kind of the whole point, giving the fortress more options and more chances to destroy anything that attacks it. I was not quite happy with the length of the barrels, so I took a moment to mess with those further, extending them to get better accuracy, better range and a little bit more damage, but in the end I was satisfied with them and went on to actually giving this turret a hull. Unlike the anti-ship cannon, which has only got that single ring of armoured hull to protect it, this one is an open top turret, which means the entire thing has to be cased in protected metal and given appropriate shielding. I designed this with a flat turret in mind to protect the actual connections to the turret's internal magazines and enhancements, and then built up a slope at the back which would house the actual firing pieces themselves. As a final enhancement, I added shields onto the front of it, winding up needing 2 shields to adequately protect the front of the turret from any incoming fire. Though I should really note that this turret will be protected by the external shields of the fortress itself as well as an added layer of defence. This is why I was trying to avoid an open top turret of this type, because I wanted it to be enclosed in armour and better protected from incoming fire, which was the downfall of the previous version of the fortress, the cannons becoming too damaged to actually do anything to protect it. I should probably also take this chance to address the question of why I bothered to design 2 separate turrets for this fortress, rather than using the previous design, which was in fact a universal turret, fitted with an elevation piece and able to engage both aircraft and ships with equal ease. You would think that some of these turrets mounted sideways would fit the role which I had for the anti-aircraft turrets, as well as still supplying the main anti-ship firepower of the rest of the fortress. And the answer is, I am keeping an eye on metal consumption. I may have a huge amount of metal in the actual campaign, but I do not want to start throwing it away recklessly in my attempts to blow up an opponent, only to find out that my guns are too ammunition dependent and really cannot be supplied in any sustainable fashion. The anti-aircraft cannon is ideally suited for light ships, hence the high rate of fire and the quad cannon design, allowing it to just pepper the opponent with small shots and destroy weak and exposed sections of the enemy craft, forcing it into the range of the heavier turrets if required. While the anti-ship cannon will feature heavy explosive shells, able to punch through the most armoured sections of an enemy ship and quickly destroy vast amounts of valuable equipment inside it. This was my plan from the beginning, to replace the laser turret as the secondary weapon system, or rather, the primary weapon system, which was what it was intended to be on the first fortress, until it proved so useless that I sincerely regret trying to integrate it. But hopefully this turret will be a lot more dangerous, a lot more stable, and it will be a lot more heavily armoured, not relying on pure shield strength for its protection. This is another reason for the extended turret designs, because it means that more of the valuable equipment can be protected inside the metal hull which I intend for this fortress, in replacement of the wooden hull which was sported by the previous one. Coming somewhat late to the party is the addition of a third turret type. After pausing to think about the 2 existing turrets which I've constructed thus far, I decided that a third turret, to add a bit of versatility and additional long-range firepower, might not be such a bad idea. To this end I started building a missile turret, because, to be honest, I miss the original turret which I used early on in the campaign, the 6-shot missile turret, which was so effective, and replacing them with the guided cannons under the control of the AI has proved less than desirable in comparison when trying to deal with the enemy ships. This missile turret is only 2 blocks thick, but I built it to the same size as the anti-ship cannon because really that means it can be mounted in the same kind of sections of the hull. It has the same size, same turning circle, and could probably be slotted in above it if I wasn't so worried about the missile actually colliding with the cannon. Originally I was going with a 9-tube missile design, intending to launch large volleys of missiles to just blow apart anything that's in the general direction that I'm aiming at. Although sadly, since this is planned to be an AI controlled turret rather than one under my direct authority, it is with some concern that I decided to build it with a laser designation system, making it automatically guided missiles rather than an infrared homing system, which should hopefully make it a bit more reliable in hunting out specific targets over long ranges. It took me quite a while to try and work out exactly what kind of missiles I wanted to include in this particular design, going so far as to extend the actual launchers themselves later because I decided to include additional modules. But I'm quite happy with what I came up with in the end, resulting in an 8-tube missile launcher, each launcher fitted with twin fragmentation warheads, plenty of fuel for long range, and actually mounting 2 thrusters. which would let them close on the target quicker and hopefully give them a chance against anti-missile systems which were so effective against my earlier, slower designs and actually caused me to abandon using them. The final addition I made to these particular missiles was a one-turn system, which would allow them to actually turn towards the direction that's being faced and would allow maybe some personal control of them, but let's not be too hopeful. This is going to be an AI system used for bombarding targets at long range. How useful it will be at close range is, well, I really don't think it's going to be any use at close range, to be honest with you. But that's that. And that makes up the bulk of the offensive systems for this fortress. A variety of cannons and missile launchers designed to destroy enemy ships that might wander too close, and hopefully will keep this thing more intact than the original fortress was able to manage with its secondary defensive cannons. Now, since we've just passed the 15-minute mark roughly, I think this is a good point to stop the video, because I'm not entirely sure if I want assembly to be 15 or 30-minute long episodes, depending on how much interest a watcher might actually have in seeing me building and blathering on over such a considerable length of time. 15 minutes has seen us create 3 weapon systems to arm our new fortress with, and they should prove quite formidable in the defence of it. So, this is Iron Mark III, and thank you for watching.